Flo10 as a architect's perspective on it, really. The first years of practice, we've got 5 offices throughout the UK, and we also work on a number of different sectors. So a lot of those sectors we work on collaboratively between our offices. So the question we had was, well, why do we need project tracking? And what we've seen sort of post Grenfell is a big change in the environment we work in. PI insurers are far more onerous in terms of the requirements they have. A lot of elements such as the golden thread, how do we follow information right through the whole process and lifetime of a project? How do we deal with quality assurance? And that's becoming an increasingly large part of each project. Increased legislation, things are becoming a lot more complex, and that complexity generates a lot more paperwork, a lot more reports. And accountability is important. How do we know that we've done things at the right time? And clarity, how do we find the right piece of information? So all of those things led us to examine what we have in terms of project tracking. And this isn't new. Architects have always recorded project information. We've traditionally used daybooks and filing cabinets to store and record all of our information. It was hard work, but we all did it and got used to it. With the advent of computers, we thought, great, there's this great big bucket that we can drop everything in. We can use a search engine to find all that information very, very easily. But the information we get out is only as good as that information we put in at the beginning. And because we became lazy at naming things, it meant that every time we had to look for a piece of information, it was like looking for the proverbial needle in a haystack. Drawings and documents were named incorrectly, possibly filed in the wrong locations. So we came to the conclusion that we needed some help. So on that basis, we called in Flo10 to help us set up Tracker. So what is Tracker? Well, it's effectively an interface between the document management system, so what we term the big bucket of information and data that's sitting there, and the project team. So that was an interface that allows us to find information quickly, and also to find the correct information. So a system that sort of displays the key information we need, the up-to-date information, and makes it easily accessible. And we also wanted something more than that. We wanted a guide that people can follow through the project process to make sure that all items are ticked as we go through. So everything we're required to do is done and easily accessible. So the slide here just gives you a snapshot of what we call Tracker. Which is the interface between us and our sort of information storage system. And it follows through the RIBA work stages. We've got the sort of a separate section up here at the moment, which is our appointments and framework section. But you'll see there it launches off with strategic definition at stage 0. It displays the work stages we're currently working to, so technical design on this particular example. It displays in green the items that we've completed. It flags up items that are incomplete without a deadline, and items in red that are incomplete that do have a deadline, and then grayed out areas that are non-applicable. And this leads us through a process that we follow through on every project. It also gives us information at a glance as to where we have things that are potentially overdue, when things are due. So it gives us that project timeline as well, and allows me to access easily a group of my projects or my team's projects to see what tasks might be overdue, linking also into things like hours recorded on timesheets and invoices. So it gives us that overall approach. I was going to drop into Tracker now, but I've had to flip computers, so I'll talk through this one very, very quickly. So each task, it allows us to click to open a task, And within that task, it provides guidance. So we can put notes in telling staff what they need to do at each stage. It also has hyperlinks in it that we can link into key documents. And it also has an element that allows us to just drag and drop from the desktop the information we want to store in that placeholder. And that information then sits there, is up to date and easily accessible on this front screen rather than trawling through a whole host of documents. It displays key data that we may want. So, for example, level of PI insurance or building height, those things. So at a glance, anybody can come into this project, see where we are in the process and access that key information or any particular notes. We can also allocate tasks to certain people. So, for example, a credit check on a company goes to our accounts team. So that's an automatic process that they then fill in and populate the system. So for us, it actually allows us to access all of that information very quickly and very easily. So how did we implement it? Well, this is always the problem with systems, and it comes down, a lot of it is to the quality of the brief. So what did we give to Flo10, Matthew and his team, to enable us to set this up? Firstly, it's important to understand what you need, and that takes a lot of time to really drill down and think what are the key bits of information we need to display. And on this element, I'd say don't be over ambitious. It's very easy to think of a very, very complex system that gives you everything you need. But I would say start off simply, keep it simple and deliverable, so you get sort of quick wins and then build on that strong base. Important to map it out as well with each stage. Some of these have built-in intelligence, so there's questions that you answer that then direct you to the next task, so that the tasks appear depending on the answers you make. So there's a sort of flowchart approach to that. And also review and challenge what you think you need early on, because we went through a number of iterations on how we set this up. We had some small working groups, we challenged it, we simplified it. And then when you roll it out, communicate it. And that's really one of the key elements is communication. How do we explain to staff what's needed, the benefits to them, and how to use it? In terms of mapping it out, this is just an extract from the appointments section of Tracker, and our practice directors set this process up to basically show how those tasks happen. And each of these boxes is a task, and you then have questions that you answer that lead off to other branches, and some of these branches actually loop back around to the beginning. So there's a lot of complexity built into this, but what it means is that a complex process of agreeing an appointment, it goes through in stages. It's sort of almost yes no answers to lead you on to the next stage. And we did this on a number of the more complex tasks so that people could understand the process and what was happening. Communication engagement, I said, is important, and really that's one of the vital elements. Explaining what the system is in simple terms, what the benefit is to staff, and then trying to get staff engagement. So we involved a number of different teams, different disciplines in formulating the process to try and get that staff engagement and to try and get people to take ownership of it. We have had to use a carrot and stick process. We've encouraged wherever we can, but this year we made the use of Tracker a mandatory element on people's reviews. So that way they don't get a bonus if they're not using it. So we have had to use the stick approach as well. Unfortunately, the carrot wasn't quite enough. It's also important to have a feedback loop, a very simple process that people can add notes easily if something goes wrong. And this is a task we've asked Matthew's team to look for us, a little sort of feedback button on Tracker, so people don't have to go out into a different system. They can click on the button, add a comment, and it goes through into the process, a bit like a ticketing system. As a practice now, I think we've now reached the tipping point where people are realizing that the accessibility of information through Tracker is good. It is important, and it is making people's jobs easier and easier to find information.